It's 500 a.m. Your alarm rings and you swear you hear your brain groan? You've got to be kidding me. Your mind refuses to budge like a stubborn kid throwing a tantrum while a tiny voice of reason pleads, "Come on, you'll feel great afterward." Many people struggle to start hard, uncomfortable tasks, whether it's exercising, studying for an exam, or tackling a big project. We often think we're just lazy or weak-willed, but it's not really a willpower problem. It's more about how our brains are wired to avoid discomfort. When faced with a daunting task, your brain often behaves like a spoiled child throwing a tantrum to avoid the work. At the same time, another part of your brain acts like a fragile ego protector, terrified that if you try and fail, it'll hurt your precious self-image. With both these forces at play, it's no surprise there's an inner war every time you contemplate doing something difficult. So how do we outsmart this stubborn brain? The key is to trick it gently rather than try to overpower it. Instead of wrestling with your willpower and losing you, give your brain a sugar-coated version of the hard task. Essentially, you hide the vegetables in the brownie, so to speak. By using a few clever strategies, you can get your mind to cooperate without all the drama. Here's how to shrink an intimidating task into a tiny first step. Bribe your inner procrastinator with rewards. Turn work into a game and change your self-talk so doing the hard stuff feels more natural. The first and most effective way to pacify your brain's screaming is to make the task smaller. I mean ridiculously small. Take whatever you need to do and scale it down to an action that takes 2 minutes or less. Why 2 minutes? Because it's so trivial, your brain doesn't put up a fight. Write a 20-page report sounds like scaling Everest, but write one sloppy paragraph sounds like stepping over a puddle. If you're dreading a long workout, promise yourself just 5 minutes of exercise or even just one. Crucially, give yourself permission to stop after that small start. Knowing there's an easy escape hatch keeps your brain calm, and often momentum will carry you further once you begin. For example, when I really don't want to study, I'll promise myself to read just one page. If I'm avoiding a workout, I'll do just one push-up. That tiny start almost always feels easy, and once I'm doing it, I usually continue with more on my own. By breaking a huge challenge into tiny, non-scary pieces, you neutralize the negative emotions around it. Getting started is often the hardest part, and once you're in motion, it's much easier to keep going. The 2-minute rule isn't about finishing the whole task, it's just about starting. If after a minute or two you really want to stop, you can, but more often than not, you'll realize it's not so bad and decide to keep going. But even after baby steps, your inner child might still pout. "I don't wanna, it's boring." The answer, bribery. Promise yourself a reward for doing the hard thing. Pair something you need to do with something you enjoy. For example, I only let myself watch my favorite show while running on the treadmill. I might also promise myself a fancy latte only after I finish a big chunk of work. It's the classic, do your homework, then get ice cream approach, and yes, it works. In this way, you're dangling a carrot in front of your brain, making the task feel worthwhile right now, not just for a distant future payoff. In fact, you're more likely to stick with a habit if it's coupled with something enjoyable. Go ahead and bribe your inner procrastinator. Just be sure to only hand over the reward if you actually do the thing. Now let's tackle the ego issue, your fear of failure or looking foolish. A powerful way to beat this is to make the task feel like just a game. When you approach a challenge in a playful, low-stakes way, your ego isn't on the line. If you can find a way to have fun with a difficult task, or at least not take it so seriously, you'll be far less afraid of failing. So, how do you do this? Turn the task into a game or experiment. Give yourself permission to do it badly. For example, if you're afraid you'll suck at writing or painting, challenge yourself to create the most ridiculous draft or artwork imaginable. If the gym intimidates you, go in with the mindset that you're just playing at the gym, not trying to be a superstar. Once the pressure to be perfect is gone, it's much easier to start. Instead of thinking, "I have to succeed at this or I'm a failure," tell yourself, "I'm just going to give this a try and see what happens." It's like a low-stakes trial run. Even if it doesn't go great, you've learned something and can try again. By taking this approach, your ego won't feel like it's life or death. You'll be more willing to start the hard thing because it no longer feels like a final exam for your identity. Finally, change the way you talk about yourself. Start telling yourself you're the kind of person who does the hard thing rather than someone who needs to do it. For example, instead of thinking, I need to get in shape, say, I'm a person who works out. The first phrasing implies you're not fit, and your brain hears, I'm not the exercising type. The second phrasing, however, aligns the action exercise with your identity, and our brains love to act in line with who we think we are. When you genuinely start seeing yourself as an active, healthy person, skipping the gym will feel weird. Now, this isn't about delusion. I'm not saying you should look in the mirror and declare, I'm a millionaire. The key is to align your self-talk with the process of who you want to become, not an outrageous end goal. So say I am a writer identity, instead of I'm going to write a best-selling novel this year outcome. The identity-based statement will encourage you to show up and write regularly, whereas the grand outcome statement could just set you up for disappointment. Keep reinforcing that identity, and eventually doing the hard thing will start to feel natural. You might even reach a point where not doing it feels off, because it's become part of who you are. At the end of the day, you won't need to trick yourself forever. Once you build momentum and good habits, doing hard things will feel easier. Still, whenever you feel that inner resistance creeping in, you can always pull these tricks out again. The goal is simply to get yourself started. Often you'll find the task isn't nearly as bad as your brain's tantrum made it out to be, and you'll get a rush of accomplishment. Go ahead and use these hacks to dupe your brain into action. It might grumble at first, but with a little cleverness, you'll turn I don't want it into, hey, that wasn't so bad. Remember, the hardest part is usually just taking that first step. And yet, even as you read this, you can feel that resistance brewing, like some ancient beast waking up inside you, muttering all the reasons why not today, maybe tomorrow, or why you're too tired, too busy, too unprepared. Isn't it strange how your brain will work overtime inventing sophisticated arguments for inaction when just a tiny sliver of that energy could actually get you moving? The mind is a master at self-sabotage, an evil genius with a PhD in excuses. It conjures vivid daydreams about future success, but the moment you try to take the first real step, it slams you with paralyzing doubt. What if I'm not good enough? What if I try and fail and everyone sees? It's almost comical the way you can imagine 1,000 disasters from a single action, but can't picture even 5 minutes of focused effort. So you stay in bed, scrolling, negotiating with your conscience, convincing yourself that the stakes are higher than they are. You might promise I'll start after breakfast, but breakfast becomes lunch. Lunch becomes dinner, and suddenly you're bargaining for tomorrow like an overworked lawyer pleading for a delay. The whole day slips away not because you lack time or talent, but because you're letting your emotions and ego pilot the ship. And the most twisted part? Sometimes deep down, you'd rather be the tragic hero of a story about lost potential than the beginner stumbling through real effort. You secretly admire your own suffering, as if being stuck is nobler than risking embarrassment. That's the real mind game. Your brain pretends it's protecting you when really it's chaining you up for its own comfort. But here's the secret: action is always less painful than dread. Even the smallest step, the tiniest victory breaks the spell. The first push-up, the first messy paragraph, the first awkward attempt at something new, each one is a slap in the face to the inertia that's kept you stuck. You might not feel like a champion, but you'll feel real. And in the end, that's what matters, doing the thing, not dreaming about it. Your future self doesn't need another excuse or apology. It needs you to do the smallest, most imperfect thing right now. Stop waiting for inspiration. Stop idolizing discipline and just trick yourself into starting. There's no heroism and hesitation, just quiet regret. The only way out is through. And once you're moving, you'll wonder why you ever let that whining inner child run your life.